Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it's just past midnight on Wednesday, October the 16th, which makes this the news for Tuesday, October the 15th, day 966 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the news from Kyiv, the Live at 5 from Kyiv, with the latest news and happenings from on the ground here in Ukraine. Hey, Jonas, how you doing? Everybody say hello to Jonas. Jonas is the sponsor of tonight's live. We appreciate you, Jonas. Thank you. Thanks, Evi. I'm having a good day, busy day, long day, crazy day, man. In the news, we got a bunch of things to talk about. Hey, Renee Herman. Hey, Steve with a V. Hey, John. Anthony, Tommy Tom. Hey, Fitz. Nicola. Hey, Mel. Hey, Cheyenne. Hey, PT. How's everybody doing tonight? So, ladies and gentlemen, and other non-binary folks, my name is Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv, bringing you the latest news and happenings from on the ground here in this incredible European capital city that is under siege, day 966 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. And I do like to think that it is, Keith. I appreciate that. Thank you, man. I do appreciate that. So overnight last night, we saw Russian ballistic missiles target the city of Mykolaiv, destroying residential buildings. There were 17 victims there. Russian shelling also hit Kherson and killed 2 elderly women in their homes, because that's what you want to do in a war, right? Is unalive grandmothers in their beds. That's who the threat is. That's where the war needs to go, right? It's unbelievable. America's broke. You hear a lot of bullshit about this kind of thing. Let me tell you something. In the last 5 years, the American economy has grown by $4 trillion. Do you know how big the Russian economy is? It's $2 trillion. What did I say? Billion? No, I meant trillion. American economy has grown by $4 trillion in the last 5 years. The Russian economy in toto is $2 trillion. The American economy has grown in the last 5 years by 2 Russias. And that's just the growth. That's just the growth. So this idea that America is broke is the biggest bullshit I ever heard. And these people who say these things are completely clueless about how the world works. Completely clueless. I got blocked by a guy who was talking about American debt and how much America is in debt. And how China owns the debt and these other people own the debt. These are people who don't understand the bond market, who don't understand what a debt instrument is, who don't understand how bond sales and the desire of other nations to hold bonds in your currency benefits you and creates wealth for you. Their understanding of international economics is grade school. It's sheer ignorance of the worst sort. All right, now, look at fucking 2 days ago, if somebody said to me that there were North Korean troops inside of Ukraine, I would have said, well, we heard that. We heard that they were going to send troops. Maybe there's some engineering troops. Like, we don't have any confirmation of it. In the last 48 hours, that story has broken wide. We see the North Koreans blowing the bridges and the roads to South Korea. Now, why are they doing this? Because they are the first nation to enter this war with their own uniformed troops on the ground on behalf of Russia, and they are worried about the consequences. So they are trying to protect themselves, lining artillery and military units along the southern border with South Korea, because they are worried about the backlash when it's widely known that there are 10,000 likely North Korean infantry troops boots on the ground inside of Russia and Ukraine. There are at least 3 training centers where they are doing live artillery fire exercises, training these North Korean troops. Yeah, Eli, the reports have gone from 3,000 to 10,000 overnight is what we're hearing now. Remember back in June when we first started hearing stories about this mutual defense pact that Russia and North Korea were signing, and that the North Koreans were going to send troops. Remember when we first started hearing those stories? Remember what everybody said? Everybody laughed and said, hey, the North Koreans, as soon as they get out of North Korea and they see the way that the rest of the world lives, the first thing they do is they try to run. They try to flee. They try to get asylum out in the rest of the world. Oh, yeah, hold on. I'll get to the sources in a second, Dawn. That's a great question. It's a fair question. Hang on to that thought. So, Lars, the story of the North Korean soldiers trying to flee is from reputable Ukrainian intelligence sources. According to them, at least 18 North Korean soldiers have gone AWOL from their positions 7 kilometers, about 5 miles, a little less than 5 miles. Just about the distance that Donald Trump's rally fans had to walk back to their cars at Coachella because that cheap son of a bitch wouldn't pay for buses, right? There were buses there to bus them from the parking lot to the rally, but then the buses were done and the whole rally group was stuck with a 5-mile walk back to their cars, 2 hours in 100+ weather. Right? Like, really, if that is not the perfect metaphor for what Donald Trump is going to do to all of America if he gets reelected again, I don't know what is. So, as far as the attendees at Donald Trump's Coachella event had to walk to get back to their cars, that's how far away these deserting North Korean troops were from saving their own lives by defecting to Ukraine. They were only 5 miles, less than 5 miles actually, from the Ukrainian border. Now, it's my opinion that the GUR, Ukraine's Military Intelligence Directorate, would not have released this information if they didn't already have them. That's my opinion. But I think that we are going to see, once they've been debriefed, I believe, I can't prove it yet, it's not definite, right, Dawn? But I don't think the Ukrainians would have told us about this if they didn't already have them or thought there was a good chance they were going to get them. And as soon as those guys are debriefed, we're going to hear some interesting stories from them about their life in North Korea. If you've never watched interviews with those who have escaped from the nightmare cult of personality hell that North Korea is, I strongly urge you to take a look. There's a bunch on YouTube. There's a bunch of those stories on YouTube. And I encourage you to take a look at them because it is a hellscape in North Korea. It's a fucking nightmare. So that story about the deserters from the North Korean army trying to escape to Ukraine, that comes from the main military intelligence directorate of Ukraine. Those guys are pretty reliable. Now, look, I'm not saying that they don't run psyops and they don't lie to us sometimes, and they especially lie to the Russians. I got caught up in one of those psyops one time. The Russian telegram channels were reporting all this shit because the GUR was feeding them a bunch of bullshit. And I reported it as if it were real. I became a victim of one of the Ukrainian psyops against the Russians. But this does not have that look or feel at all. Not at all. Further to this, the GUR reported today that Russia is forming a new battalion. The Buryat, I believe is how it's pronounced in Russian. Buryat Battalion. This is of the 11th Separate Airborne Assault Brigade. So they fall under the 11th Separate Airborne Assault Brigade of the Russian Armed Forces. It is clear at this juncture that North Korea is throwing its support behind Russia, as the Mutual Defense Pact that they signed back in June says, that if one is attacked, the other one will support them. And it appears that that is what is happening today. We see the North Koreans trying to secure their southern border by blowing those roads and bridges, by moving artillery and manpower to the border. I suspect because of an expected blowback from the West, potentially. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's the way the West is going to handle this. Nothing new. What world do you live in that this is nothing new? This is the first time that the uniformed soldiery of another sovereign state has joined this war on either side. The first time. Make no mistake, that's what it is. This is a broad escalation and an expansion of this war because Putin needs to forever expand this war if he is going to save the Russian economy. That is the only choice they have. Now, Fitz, the Koreans and the Russians don't use 155 millimeter shells. Just FYI, pal. They use 152 millimeter shells. So Lars is saying the same thing. Right on, Lars. So clearly, North Korea is joining the war. North Korea's increasing dependency on Russia's need to expand this war is acting as Russia's irrational puppet. There is nothing rational about these moves. These moves are the moves of the irrational. And we have got to stop trying to talk to these people as if they are rational. There is no talking rationality to dictators. Mel sent me a great clip today. It was from a Winston Churchill film, and he's saying the same thing, that you don't try to talk sense to a tiger when your head is in the tiger's mouth. Ukraine's head, make no mistake, it's Ukraine's head that's in the tiger's mouth. It's not ours. It's not the West's. It's not London, Paris, DC. It's Ukraine's. They're the ones suffering, fighting, bleeding, and dying for the cause of liberty and freedom in the world. That's who's making the sacrifices. And God damn it, the very least that we could do is support them in this fight. Have the courage of our own convictions and be there for them. It is nothing. Where the fuck is the $61 billion that Congress approved for Ukraine back in April. Where is that shit? Why isn't it here yet? Nothing is here. We saw the smallest arms packages deliveries since the $61 billion was approved. Roughly half of what was delivered every month in 2023. I'm sorry, 2022. 2023, of course, we had the terrible shell hunger from 7 months of abnegation of duty by the Republican Party. And that it's just that simple. That's who did it. Mike Johnson and Donald fucking Trump. For nearly a year now, the DPRNK, the Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, has been mining the border, building tank traps, placing artillery and troops, and removing railroad ties from the 2 remaining railroad lines to South Korea, so effectively dismantling the railroad. Now they are blowing roads and bridges, accusing South Korea of dropping propaganda from drones on Pyongyang. Hey, Pug Mahone. For its part, South Korea has neither confirmed nor denied that they were dropping leaflets on North Korea. There is a private citizen in South Korea that is well known for dropping leaflets on the North. It could well be that guy. But we don't know. I think it's likely that South Korea or this private citizen that's famous for this has been doing this kind of thing. But I would say that this response is all out of whack to somebody dropping leaflets on your country. North Korea blames the escalation on the confrontational hysteria. Confrontational hysteria of South Korea and the U.S. Is it confrontational hysteria in the face of genocide? Because that's what we're looking at here. That's what we're talking about here. North Korea described the drone flights as the enemy's serious provocation because these cunts are so thin-skinned they can't take a few leaflets dropped on the territory. Kim Jong-un went on to discuss unspecified tasks related to immediate military action. Now, that is an ominous and vague phrase, is it not? Unspecified immediate military action. Clearly, we are at a critical inflection point in this war. And I would point out to you that in my estimation, the very fact that we are discussing Russia bringing in North Korean troops, ammunition, ballistic missiles, Iranian drones, Iranian ballistic missiles, desperately trying to Shanghai the poorest people in the world to come and fight their war for them, is Vladimir Putin's admission of failure. It is his admission of defeat. He's got to turn to the rest of the axis of evil to support him and to expand this war if it is to continue. And I think that that's precisely what we're seeing in this thing with the North Koreans. Again, the latest report is that 18 North Koreans, part of somewhere between 3,000 and 10,000 North Korean infantry troops that are in Russia and potentially in temporarily occupied Ukraine, have abandoned their posts, have deserted their posts in Bryansk, somewhere near, less than 7 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, and are likely either making their way to safety or are already in Ukrainian hands. And I'm hoping that we're going to see some interviews with these guys in the next few days. Yesterday, the German parliament was addressed by the 3 German intelligence chiefs. And I gave some of the comments from those from Bruno Kahl yesterday, but I've got some more. called Germany's foreign intelligence chief, told a parliamentary hearing that whether we like it or not, we are in a direct confrontation with Russia. That a military clash with NATO was becoming an option for the Russians. Again, for Russia's economy to survive, Putin only has one choice. It's a war economy. The only way for it to survive is to expand the war. That's his option. He doesn't have the men. He doesn't have the machines. Russian espionage and sabotage in Germany are increasing both quantitatively and qualitatively, said the domestic intelligence chief, Thomas Haldenwang. Haldenwang went on to describe specific acts of sabotage, including one that I had not heard of. We've talked about a bunch of them, like the attempted assassination of the Rheinmetall CEO, the list of other arms producing CEOs that were also considered for assassination. But according to him, in July, in Leipzig, an exploding package burst into flames just before being loaded on a DHL cargo plane. Now, had this package Charles Prophet 16 says, that's not true. Putin can just sell more gas and oil. Yeah, have you looked at the price of gas and oil lately? It's dropping. It's down almost to the cap. It's almost down to the Russian cap, $60 a barrel. At $60 a barrel, Russia is making 12 and 42 is 54. They're making somewhere between $3 and $6 a barrel. That's what they're making, right? It's basically the break-even price. So this idea that Russia can just sell more gas and oil is nonsense. India has stopped buying, for the most, I should rephrase this. India's cut back on its purchases of Russian oil. They can't sell more gas because they can't get it out of the country. They don't have the LNG infrastructure to put it on boats and get it here. Exactly, Jonas. Who wants to deal with these bastards? Only the poorest countries with the greatest energy demands. China, Brazil, and India. That's who. That's who. And frankly, if they're paying below the price cap, where Russia's not making any money, I'm all for them buying as much as they can. Because it's below Russia's break-even point. Russia's literally losing money on every barrel. And it'll help keep the price of oil down for the rest of us. Now, oil prices are already falling, and OPEC is saying that they're going to increase production. If OPEC increases production, well, if Saudi Arabia is saying they're going to increase production. They are abandoning the $100 a barrel target, and they are going to increase production. Now, that's going to bring prices down. Saudi Arabia has been essentially supporting Russia for 2.5 years by restricting production, right? I think, if I'm not mistaken, production in Saudi Arabia is down from its high 3 years ago by 1.8 million barrels a day. 1.8 million barrels a day. Saudi Arabia turns around and brings that production back up, and they put almost $2 billion. Getting ahead of myself. And put nearly 2 million barrels of oil a day back on the market. We're going to see $50 barrel oil. And then Russia is losing between $4 and $10 a barrel. losing. So this is good news as far as I'm concerned. Saudi Arabia does seem to be stabbing Russia in the back with this, or at least abandoning their open support of Russia's war of aggression. That seems to be what they're doing. Now you think about this with me. We were talking about the three intelligence chiefs in Germany addressing the Bundestag yesterday, right? And the domestic intelligence chief, Haldenwang, talked about back in July, the Russians tried to get an explosive device on a DHL cargo plane. Now, just suppose that DHL cargo plane, that they had been successful getting the explosive on the plane. The plane takes off from Leipzig. It's on its way to, I don't know, let's say it's on its way to Dusseldorf or Hamburg. The bomb goes off. It blows a hole in the side of the plane. The plane goes down over a populated German area. You could have thousands of German casualties from that. This is the same kind of neglectful disregard for human life that we saw in Salisbury, England, with the casual disposal of a perfume bottle full of Novichok, a nerve gas, or nerve poison, that according to British military intelligence was enough to kill thousands of Britons. Enough to kill, and the British are hard to kill, let's be honest. Casually tossed away so that a mother of three found it and lost her life because of it, in a horrifying nightmare way, no less. It's obscene. It's an obscene, casual disregard for human life. And of course, that's the Russian standard. Continuing with the German intelligence chiefs, Martina Rosenberg, head of the German Military Intelligence Agency, said that German armed forces had seen what she called a significant increase in espionage and sabotage activities from Russia, including reconnaissance of German arms deliveries to Ukraine and surveillance of military training and armaments projects. Germany is second only to the U.S. in individual state contributions to Ukraine, and it is clear that Russia is treating Germany and the German military as the enemy. It's very clear to me and to the world and to the three chiefs of intelligence directorates inside of Germany. This week, Zelensky will unveil details of his victory plan publicly. Likely tomorrow, the 16th, there is he is to talk before the Rada, the Ukrainian parliament here in Kyiv. It is possible that he will share those details then. So we will look for that meeting coming tomorrow, and we'll see if we get some details on the victory plan. No promises there, but I suspect that's a likely place to unveil publicly the victory plan. After seven days, we're getting satellite pictures from Theodosia, where the fire at the marine oil terminal has finally been extinguished. But the facility has been effectively destroyed. I mentioned a dozen tanks burned. That is the final number. 12 storage tanks were affected, 8 were destroyed, 4 were badly damaged. Couldn't get to a baker's dozen. There's still about a half dozen tanks that are integral, but have suffered some damage. Russian forces are reportedly suffering from fuel shortages in Crimea. Mobile refueling stations have been created, and Russian command has ordered them to change location every 10 to 12 hours to prevent targeting by Ukrainian drones and ATACMs and Storm Shadows and everything else. Look at, how do you run an army when you got no gas for the tanks? When the place where you refill, right, where your fuel trucks have to go to refill, is changing all that from falling debris, Flippy. I mean, because God knows the Ukrainians never hit a target, right? It's always just falling debris. They should write that on the side of every fucking drone. Give it the name falling debris. Hey, Angela. I'm with you, Flip. This blew my mind. I was watching, not Soliev Live, but the other one, the woman. I can't think of her name right now. I'm sorry. But it's one of the Russian propagandists. And on her show, there was a Kremlin propagandist who asserted, get this, if Trump was president, Hurricane Milton would, in his words, definitely not have happened. If Trump was president, says this Russian propagandist, North Korea concerns us all, Crackerjack. If Trump were president, the hurricane would not have happened. Seemingly leaning into these crazy MAGA lies that the Democrats or the deep state somehow control the weather. Break out the tinfoil hats, Fitz, because that's what you need to listen to this bullshit. Keep drinking the potato juice, kids. Now, dig this. For his part, Trump claimed that Putin only invaded Ukraine purely because he perceived Biden as too weak to respond with decisive resolve. Now, gee, I wonder where Putin got that idea. Where do you think Putin got the idea that Biden was weak and wouldn't respond? Do you think it could have been from the Donald himself in one of these many secret phone calls that he had with Putin after he left office? 7 in total, according to Bob Woodward. He got it from the Tangerine Palpatine. Exactly. The Orange Jesus. Top finance ministers. Now, this was very interesting to me, you know, because we watch BRICS. BRICS is a joke, of course. And it's a shame because the world could use some good competition, in my opinion, right? I'm a free market capitalist. I think if you really have better ideas and you can execute better, you should do it. And you should make me better by doing it. That's how we advance. So I would like to live in a world where BRICS wasn't a joke. But these fucking guys, they are clueless. Clueless. Hey, truthful. So dig this. BRICS is having a summit later this month. Ahead of that summit, the finance ministers of all the BRICS nations were invited to Moscow. So the top finance ministers of BRICS nations avoided the summit meeting in Moscow this week, ahead of the BRICS summit scheduled for later this month, sending their junior officers instead. So the finance ministers of Egypt, the UAE, and Iran, that's quite a collection, isn't it, were present as Russian Finance Minister Silyunov called for the creation of an alternative to the Western-dominated global financial system. And an alternative to that system would be good for everybody, one that worked and that made sense. I mean, I don't know if you guys have read the Quran, but you know one of the things that the Quran forbids is interest. So you can't have interest-bearing accounts. You can't charge people to loan them money. It's a whole different mechanism for making money. And we can argue, you can argue back and forth about which ways work and which ways don't. But the reality is that for those folks who follow that methodology, you can't go to Western banks the way that you normally would. You have to have an alternative. So an alternative system, in my opinion, that worked and made sense would be good. But dig it. The only finance minister from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa that I am sure was at this meeting was the Russian. That was it. I know for sure that the finance ministers of China, India, and South Africa were not there. They stayed away and sent their juniors there instead. I have been unable to determine Brazil's position. I don't know whether or not the finance minister for Brazil was present at this meeting. But the fact that at least 3 out of 5 of your keystone members are avoiding meetings with you and sending their juniors says that you are not compelling. You are not making a compelling argument that is in their interest, in my opinion. Okay, a couple things from the front lines. In Kursk, the pressure remains high as Russian forces attempt to push Ukraine out. But they are still far from the overwhelming response that has been anticipated 10 weeks in. The Ukrainians still hold over 800 square kilometers of Russian territory. Further, Ukrainian forces are conducting cross-border raids in Belgorod, forcing the Russians, right, because they don't know. Are the Ukrainians going to try to invade Belgorod next? Who knows? So the Ukrainians keep doing these cross-border raids into Belgorod. It appears that one of the outcomes is they are increasingly fixing Russian troops along the Belgorod border, keeping them away from the fighting in Kursk, forcing them to be fixed maybe where they're not even needed. It's unclear, right? But they are definitely there, and the raids are real. In Toretsk, where insane block to block, house to house, hand to hand fighting continues, we're getting reports today of Russian forces who are disrobing, taking off their fucking uniforms, and putting on civilian clothes, which is a violation of the Geneva Convention. But they are apparently trying to advance without being seen as a target. This is bad behavior. And this kind of shit should not be rewarded by capitulation in the West. In the Pokrovsk direction, the Ukrainian armed forces have repelled another large mechanized assault, 25 APCs and 5 tanks. Of the armored vehicles, 7 were destroyed. Of the tanks, 1 was destroyed. So of the 30, all up, 8 were taken out. It is worth pointing out that Pokrovsk was a shining example of a city that had been abandoned early in the war, that 60,000 residents returned to. And now they've had to flee again. There are fewer than 5,000 people left in the town at this time, among them some 34 children. But it is expected that they will be out soon. The busy shops, restaurants, and cafes are all closed, boarded up, or demolished, being demolished because the Russians are now within artillery range and they are systematically destroying the town, building by building, block by block. What had been a safe place for frontline soldiers to easily retreat to for a little bit of R&R is soon going to be the spoiled wasteland that Russia leaves in its wake everywhere that it goes. And it's a sin. It's a sin. All right, so again, Jonas. Is Jonas Sugard here? Jonas is the sponsor of tonight's live. Jonas, thank you so much. I want to thank Jonas for his support, his ongoing support, especially on the Patreon, which makes my entire life here in Ukraine possible. I can only be here for you because you guys are here for me. So thank you, Jonas. Big thanks to the moderator team, best moderator team on the Tickety Talk, Cheyenne, Vanetta, PTJ, and Travis. Big thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server and the Alexievich archive. Big thanks to Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps public group on the Book of Faces, where these lives get posted every day if you miss one. And I forgot to send that guy a link to tonight's live. I meant to do that. Okay, anyway. And big thanks to Vanetta Larrett, who has the Google Doc share where you can get our email message templates to Congress, the Senate, and the White House, urging them to keep their promises to Ukraine and to take the gloves off Ukraine, to allow those deep strikes into Russian territory and stop these glide bombs that are tearing up the frontline troops and the frontline cities, reducing them to rubble. And we saw last week for the first time Zaporizhia hit by glide bombs, and it's been attacked by glide bombs at least on 5 subsequent occasions. So Zaporizhia city is now in the enemy's sights. Okay, so guys, that's my top line news. What I'm aware of as kind of the latest and greatest happenings on the ground here in Ukraine. Where's the link for the email? That's a great question, Betsy. Vanetta or Cheyenne, could I ask you to please post the link for the email message templates and pin that up there? Well, Eli, they haven't decimated the whole town yet. It's only the eastern part, but they're working their way forward. It's coming. Hey, Trav, how you doing? Good night, Mel. Mel, thanks for sending that clip today. That was great. I don't know who the actor playing Churchill was, but he was very convincing. Is Vanetta not here? They're not. These cities are not just unrecognizable rational squirrel. That they don't exist anymore. A friend of mine, she grew up in Bakhmut. When she got out of college, she moved to the Donbass. She bought a condo, right? And then she had to abandon it in 2014. Lost all the equity in that condo. Lost her home as she fled the Russian onslaught. And then for a while, she went back home to her parents in Bakhmut before moving to Kyiv. And then her parents had to flee Bakhmut and come and live with her in her apartment here in Kyiv. And she watched as every playground, school, building, her home, her parents' home, were destroyed. She's been displaced and seen her life torn up twice in the last 10 years. Downtown Kharkiv still in good shape? Yeah, Yeah. There's signs of attacks all over the place. And of course, the Russians have increased their use of glide bombs against the city and S-300s. A lot of S-300s coming into Kharkiv. Very hard to hit down in the 2 minutes that they're in the air coming from right across the border. But much of the city center, I went for ice cream in Kharkiv, in one of the most beautiful parks I've ever been in. I stood under an oak tree that was sprouted 1 year before the Declaration of Independence was written. And that was really something. It's really something. I actually have a bunch of acorns from that tree. My friend from Kherson told me that Russians are putting Ukraine volunteers on bounty. They may be. Now, just yesterday, so what we know about what's happening in Kherson with the with the UAV operators, they're sending young, inexperienced drone operators to the Kherson region. And they are using the civilians of Kherson as target practice to train these young operators. They are calling it the human safari. This is real. We saw a video yesterday of one of these guys dropping a grenade on a UNHRC vehicle, the UN Human Rights Commission vehicle, targeted. And then these idiots take this film of their war crimes and post it on Telegram. Like, what world are you living in? We saw a video yesterday of a 34-year-old man on a moped going about his day, trying to get his groceries in or get to work or whatever, hunted down and executed on the streets of Kherson by a drone. These strikes are as many as, they're averaging 60 to 100 a day. It's a new phase of a terror campaign. They blew up a graveyard in Lviv. They are nothing but an Yeah, you're not wrong. So Tycho has a great question. F-16 take one Su-34 down. Tycho, we're not sure. I can't say, there's very little you can say with 100% certainty through this dense fog of war. But the Russians are claiming that it was an F-16 that took it out. And increasingly, I'm seeing Ukrainian creators not merely say the Russians are reporting. Instead, they're saying it looks like the F-16s have taken out their first target. Now, could that just be Ukrainian propaganda? It could be. We have no real evidence that Su-35 was downed by an F-16, or 34, pardon me. It's entirely possible, right, given the itchy trigger fingers of the SAM operators, the Russian SAM operators, who are shooting down crop dusters and Cessnas all over Russia, that they shot it down themselves, that they're trying to cover up a friendly fire incident. But if that's true, if that's what happened, it was a friendly fire incident, then they're keeping that from their own people because there is a nearly hysterical edge to some of these Telegram posts about this incident. Now, when one considers that the F-16s entered service in 1978 and the Su-34 entered service in, I want to say 2018, maybe 2016, but mid-20-teens, right? The idea that everybody in Russia is scared that they can't compete with the F-16s is great news for the rest of us, right? It's great news for the Ukrainians. And it seems to be an admission that the F-16s are feared by the Russians. Now, Freedom Doesn't Last is making the point, hey, look, they shot down their Su-70 new stealth drone last week, and it's thought that they only had 2 prototypes of that drone. They did do that. The word on that is, now, we know that the Ukrainians took out a Nebo-M radar last week, creating what we believe to be an air corridor through the occupied territories into Russia for the use of the F-16s and other long-range weapons. Now, is it possible that that loss of eyes, that over-the-horizon eyes, from losing the Nebo-M, resulted in them taking out this prototype and using it to try to figure out what's what and where the targets are in Ukraine? Doesn't seem unreasonable, right? That's possibly why that thing was in the air. But by all reports, command lost contact and control of it. And rather than have it fall into Ukrainian hands, they shot it down. Now, in my opinion, it's entirely possible that it was Ukrainian electronic warfare that cut that communication. I don't know that. But it's reasonable to, the way that electronic warfare is playing out in this war, I think that's a very reasonable thing to think could have happened. Again, we don't know. But for whatever reason, it lost communication with command and control. Command and control decided to take it out to keep it out of Ukrainian hands, and then shot it down over Ukrainian territory. You know, if it weren't so tragic, the behavior of the Russians would be funny. Unfortunately, it is tragic. So yeah, $15 million, if I'm not mistaken, $15 million prototype UAV shot down by the Russians for fear of it falling into the hands of the Ukrainians, into whose hands they shot it down. Hysterical, right? Jonas is saying he saw reports earlier this year that the drone had been used to drop fabs closer to the front. I'm unaware of those reports, Jonas. If you have a link, shoot it to me, would you? To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time that the Su-70 has appeared in a combat scenario. Thanks. But again, fog of war, right? Things are happening all the time. We get these reports of things happening that aren't actually happening. It makes it very difficult to know what's going on. It's just about 3 minutes to the top of the hour. For me, here in Kyiv, it's almost 1 a.m. And I have had a long day. I literally got home, I want to say about 10:30. Just in time to get ready for this live, frankly. So I am tired. So let's again thank Jonas for sponsoring this live. If you would like to sponsor live, the PayPal is in the description. Van, you're the best, pal. Hey, how'd you come through Milton, pal? Dusty, I support that. I support the German solution. If you see, Dusty is saying there, the only way to protect our imminent victory, you meant imminent, that's okay. A victory is simply NATO membership. Now look, West Germany joined NATO when East Germany was still Warsaw Pact. There's no reason why the free territories of Ukraine can't join NATO while the temporarily occupied territories get folded in once the war is over. I don't see any reason why not. Why can't we use the German solution here? See you, Bobby. Thanks for hanging out. Oh, good, Van. I'm glad to hear that, man. Thanks again to the moderator team. Thanks again to Lars, Vanetta, and Nightshade. You guys are the best. So is that it then, guys? Any other questions, comments, points of observation, or personal need? Anything from anybody about anything? It's 12:59. I'm about to turn into a pumpkin. Good night, John. Good night, Phils. Hey, David Keller. Good night. All right, then. Again, pardon me. Always looking for live sponsors. The PayPal is in the description. Always looking for long-term Patreon support. So please, if anybody out there can join the Patreon, please do so. And if you want more information, join the Patreon as a free member, right? Even if you're not in a position to support me, but you just want more information, join the Patreon. More information is going to be coming through that channel in the near future. All right, Bip, Betsy. I think I saw, did I see Betty Thompson here? I'm just wondering how she's doing. If you're here, Betty, chat in how you're doing. Okay, well, anyway. Again, guys, I literally, there's no way that I could do this without the Patreon supporters. And I am lucky to have my mods, Maddie. You are not wrong. You could not be more right. David voted today in Georgia. Congratulations, David. Georgia's a battleground state, boy. Good night, John. What was I going to say? I got distracted by voting. Anyway. Yeah, that's weird, huh? About the likes. I see that. I don't know what to do, man. I don't know what to do. I'm doing everything I can. And I don't know what else to do. Flippy mentions that the politicians have started arriving today in Brussels. There is a meeting of defense ministers of NATO, if I'm not mistaken. It could be the EU. I'm not sure now. I said that out loud. But anyway, there's a big defense ministers meeting in Brussels over the next, not over the next 3 days. I think the official dates are the 17th and 18th. So that's coming. Hey, Big Red, how you doing, pal? All right, kids, make it a great day. I'll talk to everybody soon. No, Jonas, my lives get anywhere from 35,000 to 100,000 likes a night. And that's usually with only about an average of 180 people. And tonight it looks like the average was closer to 280. So very unusual. Very, very unusual that the likes are so low. I mean, fuck, Lars usually does 12,000 likes himself. It's ridiculous. Or Fitz with his automatic tapper. It's the stupidest thing. But the likes are important, so I'm very grateful. Oh, Flip, you're going to be busy, pal. No two ways about it. No two ways about it. All right, guys. Take care. Talk to everybody tomorrow.